Hi, I'm Oliver Lundy and I'm a photographer from the UK, and in this video I'm going through a shoot that I did with a very awesome and very yellow Porsche GT4. Now I'm going to take you through some of the decisions that I made, some of the shots that I ended up getting, and some of the editing decisions that I made in hope that these might give you some insights into some of the options that you could do with some of your shoots. So let's get stuck in. I'm going to chuck you onto my laptop. Okay, so as you can see, this is a very yellow GT4 and it's awesome. I love yellow cars. They just pop straight off of the image, and it's really easy to isolate them against the background. Now, originally I had intended on doing this photo shoot at a different location, but when we turned up it was flooded, and this is a clear example of why it's always good to have a backup location. So just sort of 10 minutes, 15 minutes away from here, well, my original location is this car park that I'm very familiar with, and I've shot a lot of cars here, and there's a reason for it. One, it's almost always empty on the top couple of floors, and B, or two, it's quite an industrial looking environment, and it's relatively easy to take away. It's not immediately obvious that you're shooting in just a random car park somewhere, so I like it for that. So this is the first shot I'm going to talk you through. This was a Brennheiser shot, so effectively shooting on an 85mm and doing a stitch, a panoramic of a few different images, and that gives us a slightly wider view in this particular scenario, and that's partly because it was kind of a narrow view, and I wanted to give a slightly wider look. The limitations of the space, I mean, in terms of the pillars that are in the way and so on. But if I do a little quick before and after, you can see the straight out of camera. On the left here, as you can see, the car balance is way off, it's way too warm, and there's quite a lot going on in this image. So after I've done a kind of few basic aesthetic edits, so I've brightened up the car and got the lighting to where I want it to be, I also then decided that there was way too many distracting elements in this image. I'm going to do a whole video on removing distractions because it's very important. But now, as we flick over, you can see now I've removed all the distractions. So if I go back, you can see the lighting in the ceiling. They've got these really annoying green markers that let you know where there's empty spaces, but they just pop up with these kind of glowing green balls in the photos, and I don't like that. And also there's some kind of reflections bouncing off of stuff in the foreground here. So I've got rid of all of that, and as you can see, it looks much cleaner, or at least I think it looks a lot cleaner, and the overall image is strengthened because there aren't these distracting things pulling your eye away from the car. So that was the first image. Okay, so the second image was a shot straight down the line of this of the wall, focused on the rear of the car, as you can see. And the reason why I wanted to get this shot is I think this looks quite cool, and it shows that kind of rear profile and the rear shape quite well. But also in this instance, the owner has replaced the spoiler extensions to make them bigger, which, if you're familiar with the GT4, really adds to the overall roof line of the car, and the standard GT4 bumper is set quite low. So they wanted some shots of this because it's a key feature of the car. And as you can see, what I've done with this one, I've got the before image on the left, and then I've got the after. I've basically just enhanced the overall look by trying to desaturate and darken the background and really make the car pop and be the main subject of the photo, rather than all of this kind of grunge and darkness. And I've also removed the lines on of the spaces, the car parking spaces in the foreground, to try and again remove some of those distractions. And I've also cropped in slightly just to again make the image that little bit stronger. The stuff around the car, around the edges of this frame, isn't really adding much to it, so just by cropping in a bit, you automatically bring more attention to the subject of the photo. And then lastly, we've got one of my favorites of this session, but also one of my all-time favorite car shots ever. This, in my opinion, humbly awesome rolling shot. Now all of the elements came together with this, so not only did we get the exact right level of capture, but I also managed to get the editing exactly where I wanted it. So let's go through the actual raw image a second. Yeah, so as you can see, on the left is the straight out of camera shot, and then on the right is the kind of global edits that I've done just initially to get it to roughly where I want it to be aesthetically. So as you can see on the left, it's actually overexposed slightly, and the rig that I used to capture it is still in the photo. And I think out of camera it looks pretty good. I certainly thought it was okay when I saw it on the back of the camera on the shoot, and we chose a nice low angle to try and accentuate the kind of the low slung sports car style of this car, and shot it in this particular way so that it looks like you're blasting through a tunnel, but like I said, this is actually shot in a car park. The exact methodology for using a rig is that you're going to do a long exposure and then you're going to move the car, and the blur, the motion blur in the background makes it look like it's going quickly and blurs the wheels, is because you're shooting it on a 20 to 30 second long exposure. And then normally you would expect there to be lots of blur for the car now, but that's why the rig holds the camera still relative to the car, so you can slowly push the car along a kind of walking pace, and then the car stays sharp and the overall background blurs as if it was driving much quicker. The only other way to do this is to actually, well, there's two ways. So 3 ways in total. You can do it like this using a rig. You can do it by shooting from car to car, traveling at reasonably high speeds. So you need to be going at kind of 60, 70 miles an hour, and you need to be shooting at a low shutter speed in order to get the background blur. If you're going to consider doing this, I strongly recommend you look into the safety implications of this, and also the legal implications of this if you're going to try and attempt to do this on the public highway. It's not something I would recommend, and you may well be breaking some laws or many laws doing it. And if you're a photographer and you're being paid particularly, then there may be a lot of liability issues. So just be careful, look up what you're doing before you do it, and make sure you've done your due diligence on what you can and can't do legally on the public highways. And if you need to book a private road, go to an airport, book an airfield, something like that, where you can do this without having to worry about any legal ramifications or any safety issues. Now, that's part of the reason why I like to use a rig, because you can get rid of all of those elements and you don't have to worry about the safety and all that kind of stuff. The only thing you really have to worry about is not screwing up and damaging your camera gear or the car, but that's a whole nother thing on how to use the specific rig that you have. And then lastly, you can fake it in Photoshop. And there are some really good examples of that, and some photos will work better than others. And you can make it look really, really good if you're willing to put the time in, but as with a lot of things, it can take a long time to make something look convincingly real in Photoshop. So I just prefer to do it in camera with a rig and then just Photoshop out the rig, which is actually relatively easy once you've got a bit of practice with it. So back to this photo. So this is the sort of global edits edition, which is pretty close to my final image. I then took it into Photoshop and edited out the rig. So that's actually just normally done with a combination of content aware fill, the clone stamp tool, and the repair tool. Sometimes it can be a bit awkward, but most of the time it's actually relatively easy. I'm going to do a whole video in depth on this at some point, but as you can imagine, it's quite an in-depth process, so it's going to take some time to do. But then we move on to the final edited image, where I've just effectively punched up some of the exposure, and I've done some dodging burning, and I've added some blue tones into the highlights and the background in order to make the yellow pop out. So it's a complementary color, yellow and blue. And as you can see, I think that is a pretty strong image considering the base image that was captured. And yeah, I really, really like this one. I think it's actually my desktop background at the moment too. And luckily or happily, the owner was also really blown away by this. So really happy with how the shoot went in general. I've got a bunch of other different photos, but not worth going through all of them in this video. But it was a really fun session, and if you've enjoyed this kind of look at some of the photos that I take and the ways that I go about shooting them and some of the editing choices I make, then do let me know so that I can do some more of them. And if this has been useful for you, then do drop me a like and subscribe for more videos, and I will see you in the next one.